Welcome to another podcast episode, everyone. I've got a very exciting guest for you guys. For those of you just joining us, we're E.N.G Media, and I've got Jose here with me, CEO and co-founder of Clearmatrix. So, Jose, I know that this is our second go around here. We had some technical difficulties before this, but we finally got the chance to make it happen. So I appreciate you coming back on the show.
Well, I also appreciate the opportunity to give this a second shot.
Oh, yeah.
I guess such as the world we live in, right? We still have lots of technical difficulties that we have to work through,
Oh, yeah.
but here we are again. And so excited to keep talking about some of the things that we covered the last time. And so nobody knows what we covered last time. And so we'll, we'll have a chance at a few mulligans here.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that you guys are, the master of all things AI. And so maybe we can start just giving like a little bit of a background into what you guys are working on at Clear Matrix and maybe even like going back a little bit before that, just into the
Yeah.
origin story of how you ended up forming the company overall.
Okay. So I think I'll start there. Thanks again for the introduction. For those watching, listening, I'm Jose Ferrel, CEO and co-founder of Clearmatrix. And what we are is we call ourselves an AI enablement company. What that means is that we're helping organizations and also IT resellers, companies who are already working hand in hand with their clients on all sorts of technology services, selling hardware, selling software in many cases. And what everybody's doing is trying to turn this AI confusion into a clear and profitable roadmap. And that's what we're about.
Yeah.
And before founding Clearmatrix, because I've been at this venture for just about a year and a half. Before that, I led technology and operations at some pretty large companies that included Netflix, Riot Games, and a national healthcare provider by the name of Trident Care.
Oh, wow.
And the reason that's also relevant to my interest in founding this company is because for 15 plus years, I was on the buyer side, meaning I was on the other side of the table as a leader consuming consulting services, consuming tech services, software. And my partners are my two other co-founders. They also have their own complementary backgrounds because one of them, who is our CTO, he spent about a decade at Microsoft in their consulting group. And
Oh, nice.
so his focus for close to almost 2 decades as well has been on the IT consulting side. And so he's been the deployer, the builder of all sorts of course, like Microsoft centric solutions over that time period. And then our third partner, his background is in sales, and he is our chief revenue officer. And he's also worked at some fairly large technology companies such as Oracle, CDW, Crayon. And so his background has been as a seller.
Oh,
And the compliments that we saw was just that, hey, look, we see a big problem in terms of the hardships everybody's facing, especially businesses, when it comes to AI adoption right now. And we are seeing it from all angles. I,
yeah.
of course, bring in the buyer perspective, our CTO bring in the builder perspective, and then Baker bring in the seller perspective. And when we put our heads together in terms of both the problem and the opportunity we saw, what we saw was, hey, as is usually the case at the beginning of any, major technology innovation wave,
Uh-huh.
a lot of the focus is on building the tools, building the things, and making them new or making them problem specific for
Yeah.
people to buy, for businesses to buy. And what we saw that being is hey, we're in an AI gold rush.
Yeah.
Everybody is hyper focused right now on selling those picks and those shovels, but it seems as if very few people are focused on actually selling the maps, the mining techniques, the GPS.
Yeah.
And that is what we saw and seized as our opportunity. Hey, somebody has to fix that problem. Why can't it be us?
Yeah.
And the reason that we also saw this as an opportunity is because how that problem is mostly being solved today is still with people.
Yeah.
Meaning, if you can afford it and you're a business and you want to figure out a custom roadmap and get better guidance on how it makes strategic sense for you to adopt AI,
Yeah.
you're likely going to hire some consultants to come in, assess where you're at, and then provide you with a roadmap for you to follow, investments for you to make in AI, starting points, so that hopefully you can find that success. We do want to do all of that, but what we're doing that's different from other companies. And just before, we started recording, you asked me about, hey, I saw your press release about, launching your AI enablement platform.
Uh-huh.
Well, guess what? The platform is aiming to provide that in platform form, right?
Wow.
In AI form. And that, I guess, is what we're also trying to do differently, is like, why not also leverage AI to
Wow.
help people find their way around AI?
Right. 1,000%. And I think just for clarification as well, the new AI enablement platform that you guys have
Hmm.
launched, that is providing essentially, like you mentioned, the mining techniques and the maps and really the consulting to get some of these AI implementation projects to the finish line. Is that it's helping companies and organizations leverage like the AI that they're looking to implement and kind of like, does it bring the consulting aspect? Is that what the main goal of your platform really is?
Right. Well, you have to think about what consultants are there to do. They're there to guide, but they're there also to reveal and expose what is important to the business, the current state of maturity from different aspects of the business. So it gives you sort of like that diagnostics, right? That baseline. Say that, and so that's what usually, like, you hire, consultants to do. And
Yeah.
then ultimately a list of, like, curated recommendations that make sense for your business, that are specific to your industry context, but also take into account where you might already be investing, where you might have strengths, where you might have weaknesses, and then helping you map that to actual projects and AI tools that it makes sense for you to start with versus going at it blindly. Especially, I guess, if at the beginning the interest might have started with just like a handful of pilot projects and you're
Yeah.
not quite sure where to go from there. And so the assumption, but also based on research that, we're banking on, is that, hey, most leaders today don't need more AI tools. They need a wayfinding system. And so the GPS for AI adoption, and that's what we want this platform to become, where everyone's building right now AI infrastructure and tools, but very few are helping businesses actually figure out where to start, what's we're
Yeah.
doing, and how to measure ROI. And that is where we want our platform to come in and help solve those problems.
Yeah, I love that, and I think you coming in your background before this, coming more or less on, like, the buyer side, you understand maybe some of the pain points that these businesses are struggling with and where they might fall short, and, when we talked before the podcast, you mentioned the, like, 4 core pillars that every organization looks at when they're looking at adopting AI is, like, their people, their process, their technology, and their data as well. Out of those 4 pillars, is there one that you see more than the others that the companies you guys are helping, like, struggle with really the most, or maybe there's some misconceptions on that
Yeah.
we could kinda bring up on this podcast?
Yeah. No, that is a great question. I'll tell you why. Because right now, as it should be,
Mm,
all of the attention is on data. And that's critically important, because what you're able to get out of AI is going to be based on the data you make available to AI to inform it, to train it, and so on and so forth.
yeah,
And so that is where a whole lot of attention is being paid.
yeah,
Also, where the the hyperscalers, and I'm talking about the hyperscalers, I'm talking about the Amazons, the Googles, the Microsofts, the OpenAIs, what they're also focusing on in terms of convincing the enterprise that where to start and what's important when it
mhm,
comes to adopting AI. However, I would say where a lot of businesses are not paying enough attention to is around people. And I think, like, two elements of the people dimension. One,
uh-huh,
of course, is just like the state of readiness of their workforce, meaning where are they at in terms of proficiency, in terms of exposure to AI. There's probably lots of assumptions. There's probably lots of rogue usage happening already because we all do it. We're not supposed to. Well, I mean, it's a little different for me, of course, because this is my company. But anywhere else, I'll ask my former colleagues at Netflix, are you using ChatGPT for work-based, like, questions and queries and projects? They're going to say no, but then they're going to wink, wink. And when I left Netflix, of course, there were already large initiatives to make sure that there were proper guardrails and that was being governed more responsibly, of course. And so there's that piece of the people problem. The other piece is also just understanding the workflow as a mousetrap. How do things happen in a company? How does onboarding happen? How does offboarding happening? What does, like, let's say, like um the life cycle of money or the life cycle of a person look like, within a company and all the touch points, that happen in between, often
Yeah.
referred to as workflows or business processes.
Yeah.
And so one core focus of the platform that we built is to actually extract that data. And how you extract it is there's no shortcutting it, but there
Yeah.
is a way to standardize it. But the way that you typically extract that information, because we would all hope that businesses have their business processes very
Yeah.
well cataloged, but that's not the case. And so again, if a consultant comes in, what is she or he going to do? They're going to ask tons of questions. They're going to meet with tons of people, all these department heads, all these lieutenants of department heads who are familiar with how things get done in their sales department, in their HR department, in their finance department. And they're going to document all of that to understand how, information makes it across, and cross functionally, through all these, different doors and people. And
Uh-huh.
so what we've been spending a lot of time on within the platform is that people module. What a big part of it is um, knowing which questions to ask via surveys, but also who to ask them to. And then gathering that information, analyzing it, collating it, and having and distilling that so that we then have a snapshot of their internal business processes or people, right?
Yeah.
How all the worker bees are cooperating internally, and
100%.
that's critical because that's also going to not only identify areas where AI is already being used, because that's also it's intended to suss out, but
Mhm.
to start connecting the dots and
Yeah.
sort of seize on opportunities. And hey, by the way, did you know your sales team is already perhaps like ahead of the game when it comes to AI adoption? And here are the use cases of workflows, where they're already applying AI, whereas HR might be, behind the curve. And so you might want to take some of the lessons or problems this business team is trying to fix
Yeah.
and apply that to, other areas of the business. And at the same time, business leaders want to know because they also need to make decisions as to what is most critical or most important from a business strategy standpoint at that time. So meaning like, where's the money going or where's the tech investment going?
Right.
If it's all going to sales, but they have huge deficiencies in HR, then there's probably going to need to be some adjustments and some changes there. And
Oh,
so that's
100%.
that I think is, what we're also trying to do different, but trying to make sure that we provide a good spotlight for, but
Yeah.
also focus lots of the roadmap and value on is that people element.
Yeah, I think that it's huge, and for different companies and different verticals, I think the way their people are adopting AI and what their processes and their workflows look like, it's different from industry to industry. But before companies like Clearmatrix, it's almost like, and I bet especially with AI strategy, I think it's kind of new, but seems like it was only limited to be a resource if you work with like a consultant specifically. So it sounds like your guys' mission is essentially to democratize like the strategy when it comes to AI beyond just, coming from consultants specifically. So I could see how your platform breaks it down into those pillars and how you guys are focusing mainly on the people aspect of things. So that way companies can, and I don't think they realize how important, I think that really is just because all of this is so new right now, but you're almost forcing them to get a better hold of their data, get a better hold of their people and the way their processes are right now. Because as you know, if they start leveraging AI specifically, it will amplify whatever results are currently being made. It kind of shines a light on what people don't want to see and where they'd like to kind of just turn their head the other direction. So the fact that you guys take more of a consultative approach, you help them get that aligned beforehand, I think that's probably contributes to why, your guys' projects are actually successful.
Well, you touched on, I guess, something that was very important to us in figuring out how is it that we're going to structure our subscriptions, for the platform. Meaning, how is it that we're going to make it available and easily accessible and affordable, regardless of your business side, your size. And so we recently decided, hey, we're going to have, three subscription tiers and fairly straightforward. Uh, First subscription tier is going to be based on the number of business units for small and mid-sized businesses. And very accessible, very also, affordable. When you compare what you would typically need to pay, even like a singular consultant to come in and do this work, there's also like going to be a mid-market tier. And the mid-market tier, of course, is, for companies that are growing or a bit larger and thus have more complexity, more business units. They need to be analyzed, taken into account. And also, again, larger environments because a key component of the platform does connect to, let's say, an their existing cloud ecosystem, whether it's like AWS or Azure. We're also going to be doing this for a Google Cloud
Nice.
platform. And so this way it's able to scan, that infrastructure and get a snapshot of the current state and also AI readiness, including the data sources and environments.
Oh, well.
That's going to make more sense for, of course, the larger companies. And then the enterprise tier, we have that right now as TBD because there's too many variables. And
Yeah.
so we would need to learn more about businesses that are much larger to have a better sense for what sort of level of, service and usage on the platform is going to make, sense for them. But I actually get very excited. And we do have an active cohort right now on the SMB side, so the small and mid-sized business, because I think that even from my own experience, one of the key advantages that you have as a small business right now is, and or even like as an entrepreneur, is you're going to have a healthier appetite to experiment. You're going to be able to, move more quickly in starting to adopt AI in your day to day. And I think that one of the, like, so when it comes to personal friends, who are
Yeah.
also, entrepreneurs in their businesses, it seems today that there's almost a little bit of embarrassment with, like, let's say, are you using AI? Yeah, I'm using ChatGPT, but I know I should be using more. And I actually, like, encourage them, like, no, don't be embarrassed. That's a great starting point. I mean, ChatGPT, not, we're not an OpenAI partner, so I'm not getting paid for promoting their product in any way, but we use it ourselves in many, many different ways.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a Swiss Army knife. And so you can leverage it, even if it's just to boost your personal productivity, because that still matters to your business in many different ways. And so you can save yourself tons of time, and time is precious, definitely for small business owners and for entrepreneurs. But then
Yeah.
eventually you get to that graduation point. That's going to make you curious because, again, it's a Swiss Army knife. So it can do a lot of things. But once you need to do one thing very, very well, then you start looking for different tools.
Yeah.
And you start looking for more specialized LLMs, let's say, that can provide, like, value or more advanced features. And that's, again, when you start sort of really, branching out and advancing. So I think that, what still sort of validates, the thesis here is when we see that happening.
Oh,
When
yeah.
we see, especially like those SMBs who previously, were very intimidated or felt as if they were only starting at a very small level with adopting AI, feeling, much more empowered, but already getting into, we call this sort of like the crawl walk, run, where
Yeah.
they're already starting to get into that, walk phase
That's awesome.
and thinking more creatively in terms of how they can now start bringing in those like specialized tools or thinking, about more interesting LLMs to adopt in their businesses.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you guys are positioned in a unique way to where you're able to work with small to medium sized businesses, obviously mid-market companies, and then enterprise customers as well. Have you been able to bring over any of like the strategies or, maybe key findings that you found from the SMBs that are maybe a little bit more flexible in adopting and trying new things with you guys to some of those mid-market and enterprise companies like, hey, there's some really good insights here that we've tested and we've proven a proof of concept with for an SMB that it could help, a mid-market company or an enterprise company. Like, has there been anything or any insights that you guys have collected on that front or not just yet?
Yeah. I'm thinking about, I guess, some of the patterns
Uh-huh.
we're already seeing. Well, I'll tell you, one, okay, so this is actually something, very, very recent. We're building this platform. One of our target customers is going to be, as I said, like, channel partners, also known as IT resellers. And don't want to go like too much into jargon, but just if, for those less familiar with, the world of channel partners and IT resellers, just think of it as any vendor that sells technology to a business. And so that's usually in the form of services or hardware or software. And so most businesses have a company they already go to. They're buying these technology from. Often, and in many cases, there's several
Yeah.
they're using. And those channel partners are also finding a very limited resources when it comes to having like, more holistic visibility into the current state of AI readiness across all of their clients. And so that's going to be helpful to them because that's going to help them to also, sell the right, services, sell the right, consulting support they're going to need to adopt AI. And so that is still like a very relevant strategy in terms of, go to market for us. But
Yeah.
something that interesting that we thought about, some of our early partnerships on the consulting side have been with private equity investors. And for those, again, who are not familiar with that world, the way that I often describe it to friends and family is just think of them as fix and flippers of businesses.
Yeah.
So they see an opportunity in a certain market, they come in, they buy businesses, they fix and flip them, and then sell them for a profit, and then move on. And so at a singular time, they might have as many as 60 or hundreds in some cases of companies in their portfolio. And most of these companies, some of them are small, but some of them are like in the mid-market market space. And they too also need to have this like holistic, visibility into the current state of AI readiness across all of their portfolio companies. They want to make it standard. They also want to make it fast and affordable. And so recently we've actually started to have some conversations with a few, friendly private equity companies, because I think that there's also a good opportunity for our platform to provide, value to that world. And I think again, I guess the thread there or the problem is, hey, what if you own multiple businesses? How is it that you're going to be able to, one, assess where they're at in terms of AI adoption, but then also make sure that you have a means to provide, to very quickly produce like strategies and a roadmap for each of these companies so you can get them to that flippable state? Because and they're looking eventually to sell, and their holding time for lots of these companies are typically 3 years, five tops. And so they're also in a hurry to make these transformative changes move quickly, especially, I guess, if there's lots of productivity and efficiency gains that AI could provide for them.
Absolutely. I think the value proposition is clear, especially for the VCs and the private equity companies, and how they can start to differentiate themselves to kind of outperform maybe some of the folks that they're competing with. And I like that approach from a go to market standpoint. We've also, providing the go to market solutions that we do have formed strategic partnerships with like venture capital firms to where we help them with like go to market due diligence specifically so they can better assess like growth stage early tech companies, what's the probability for them to find product market fit, or at least get some of those hard numbers
Yeah.
on like if they know the numbers within their business in the specific ICP that they're looking to provide solutions for. And so it's unique. I don't hear a lot of AI companies looking to go form strategic partnerships with investors, but then also with the IT resellers as well. I think that that's interesting because
They're facing the same problem.
pretty much for the for
Yeah.
the for the most part, yeah, it all comes down to their data and their numbers overall. But I think from your guys' perspective, our audience are early stage technology companies. And I
Mhm.
wanted to ask you, Jose, what have you found has worked best? I know there's no silver bullet, there's no magic wand when it comes to growth, but have you guys found any kind of relevant like strategies or overall frameworks that you've been able to leverage? And is it, strategic partnerships that have helped you guys be able to grow and acquire new customers the most? Or is there maybe anything else that could be helpful to folks in the audience that they could leverage to grow their own tech
Yeah.
business?
Well, I would say that, yeah, you touched on, I guess, the first tip that I would offer,
Yeah,
because at least for us, in the early stages, having those strategic partnerships has definitely paid dividends, both on the services side, which is where we started, but now also on the platform, because that's also helping to funnel pilot program, participants, for the platform.
nice.
And so that has helped us. Something else that we continuously think about is, and I think everybody should too, because already, I mean, we've done our fair share of pitches, and there's probably hundreds more on the horizon there to prospective investors, partners, clients, so on and so forth. What makes you different? And so put some thought as usual into your differentiator and what is going to make sure that what you're building or what you're doing is going to have stay power. And the story for us there is, hey, we know that there's going to continue to be this continuous build out of new LLMs, new tools, new, solutions. And that's going to continue to be overwhelming for everybody, including like leading to fragmentation, because we know this because, and we already encountered many tools that do the same thing or very similar things
Mhm.
when it comes to AI. And that's just, the way it goes. Long term, that fragmentation will probably lead to more consolidation, and those companies that have, a good product market fit, but also were able to seize on that traction and build on those partnerships, found success and growth, whereas others might fall by the wayside. One caution flag that I throw out there is think about how you're going to operationalize support and service for whatever product, or if even if it's a service, or even if it's
Yeah.
something else. Like, how are you going to make sure that you're from cradle to grave, or end user, your end client, whoever's buying this from you is going to have a positive experience? Because that's
Oh
going
yeah.
to, be important. I think that's what's often overlooked. I don't think that's, and I don't think that's a new problem, but something that you often see just in the software development world in general. I mean,
Yeah.
engineers like to build, they don't necessarily like to support, but you have to think about the entire user experience. And so that's something that we continue to pay attention to. The staying power for us is, hey, even in fact, more so as this AI landscape becomes noisier and noisier, you're going to need somebody, and in our case, hopefully our platform, to help find your way, to help minimize the noise and turn that into signal that makes sense for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you dived into, the support side of things as well. I think it comes down to it's manual at first, but like the right kinds of documentation. So there are ways that you can start to operationalize a lot of different things. I've seen a bunch of really, really cool strategies from people like Adam with RB2B, just people who have these small lean teams that have operationalized the technology solutions that they're providing
Yeah.
to the market. But, I think the insights that you shared with our audience, they're really unique because you guys actually have, investors as well. And so what tips would you say or maybe advice would you give to another founder who has like an engineering background, or maybe they've got a small team of a couple of co-founders when it comes to raising money and finding the right investors? Like, is there anything that you guys did specifically? I'm sure that your background, it sounds like
Yeah.
you have a really holistic team that has insights from the buyer side, from the seller side, and from the consulting side as well. But do you think that the investors, like the confidence that they have in you guys and why they invested in you, was because of like the team, the technology, or kind of like a blend of both, would you say?
I would say that, well, it depends on the type of investor. And for us, like we just closed, a successful pre-seed in the form of a friends and family raise. And
Nice.
so what we learned there, but what we also heard as we decided to pursue that as the option to raise money is, hey, at this stage, friends and family are going to bet on you. So they're going to bet on the team, and thus the talent. And so focus on inspiring confidence in the team, the talent. Of course, like, the vision and the product matters,
Yeah.
but if like, especially, and this is a case even for us, most of
Yeah.
our investors are definitely not familiar, with this context.
Mhm.
We've absolutely provided tons of education and context around, what we're doing. But ultimately, I think it comes down to that trust in the talent and saying,
Yeah.
okay, well, I am not sure I understand, what AI enablement is. I get it, like in principle,
Right.
but I like the story, and I trust in Jose, Aaron, and Baker to figure this out, somehow. And so I
Yeah.
think that if you do decide to, let's say, raise capital via like, friends and family, that is ultimately what's going to matter most. Not just coming from me, but this is also the advice I gathered before we decided, because, there were a few other options we considered, everything from SBA loans to all bootstrapping this a little longer
Yeah.
to, even like, private financing, which is always like stressful, especially if, you're collateralizing and betting on the growth of your company with, more of, your money or credit lines.
Yeah.
So, and there's probably more big decisions for us down the road, or I would say there definitely will be. And I
Yeah.
think that's where, if we do plan for that next round, it's going to be a different type of investor. And so I think we'll need to educate ourselves on what those investors are looking for. I'll
Yeah.
tell you this much, because this might be helpful, and this was helpful advice I recently received,
Sure.
is we are also we have again good partnership with this fintech company we already work with. We were sitting around having beers, and And what they're further along though, they're actually already close to starting to raise Series A money, Series A capital. And what they were, telling us is prospective investor conversations at that level are much easier to be had because you already have 3 years of traction. You survived, those 3 years. And
Yeah.
thus they see you as like, hey, the risk is a lot lower than, betting on an early stage startup. And so I think to me, at least, for us, that was also aspirational. It's like, okay, great. So it's good to hear that at some point, the better of course, there's a lot of other uphill battles to get there, but the better we do, the easier it's actually going to become for us to also attract larger institutional investors that are not necessarily going to, make us jump through hoops. But
Oh
all
yeah.
that said, I think that if and when we go on that, next, seed round, there might be some, and as they should be, some tough
Yeah.
vetting conversations and some tough pitch lessons for us to go through.
Absolutely. I think that, yeah, and kind of just to recap on what you just said, it sounds like early on, investors are betting a lot on the founders themselves and them being able to
Right.
successfully execute what their plan is. And for folks that think, oh, yeah, that sounds great, what Jose just said, like, oh, they'll bet on you. It's not all about the technology. I've talked to investors that have literally gotten on podcasts with companies that they've invested in, not 100% understanding exactly what their technology does or exactly the vertical that they're in, but they just bet on the founder. They're like, I know that these guys are going to be successful just because of their previous experiences, but I can just feel that energy. And I think maybe it's just intuition from the investors and the successful, companies that they've invested in the past as well. I always find that is really interesting, but I think it's a good, refreshing sign too to hear that as you guys continue to go on and you raise a Series A or whatever your guys' plans are, those conversations get a little bit easier. Your guys' product market fit is stronger. You're going to have this solidified platform that has tangible results. And so you guys will have more leverage to be able to raise the kind of money that you're looking to raise. And, kind of before we wrap up here, Jose, do you guys have any new initiatives over the next 12 months as a company, like with your product roadmap? Or is there anything maybe that you can share with the audience that they might not be aware of?
Well, we're working on that. And so we have in the works. And in fact, towards the end of this week, I've got 2026 planning meetings with my partners and, my leadership team.
Nice.
But one of the milestones we are trying to hit by the end of this year is to ship version one. And version one being, of course, the first, commercially, viable, version of the platform where we
Nice.
have the means to already sort of enable online subscriptions for this, but make sure again, we have the support apparatus so that we're thinking about the whole, customer experience end to end. In addition to that, we are working on building out that, channel partner, portal, sort of like that admin dashboard,
Oh, nice.
as well as a few, interesting things. And so what we're continuing to think about is, but we'll have to test the market for this, is how can we increasingly make the platform more and more valuable as an AI wayfinding and road mapping platform. And so I think that's what most of 2026 is going to be about. But of course, the prime focus is going to be to seize and build that market traction.
Yeah.
Get because once we have that data, those users on the platform, that's where we're going to learn the most. And that's where it's going to be most valuable to us in terms of, making sure that it's living up to our mission and our vision for it.
Yeah, I love that. And, I know I said this is the last question, but just one more thing. I think,
Sure.
for the folks that have made it this far, it sounds like, obviously you're not a one man band. Like you have a really talented team of co founders and other team members as well. What's maybe the most valuable thing that you've gotten in working with your co founders? I know you mentioned their expertise, like, one of your co founders brings expertise in consulting, one brings expertise from the selling side of things. But, what are maybe some intangible things that your co founders have brought to the table that have helped Clearmatrix get to the point that it's at now? Like, is there anything that comes to your mind?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. So one thing that's important to us is, even though again we were friends and colleagues, prior to this venture, is we still take sort of our routines and rituals, our corporate routines and rituals, very seriously. What I
Mm,
mean by that is part of it is just obligatory, right? Like, for example, we're structured as a Delaware C Corp. So, hey, we need to have our board meetings. We need to have, our quarterly business reviews and such. But, when we do, we don't take those lightly. And so we ask ourselves, I guess, the hard questions
mhm.
to be objective and hold ourselves accountable, regardless of the relationship. And we speak, candidly about where we see strengths, where we see opportunities, to do better, and how we could also support each other to strengthen those areas, right? Especially where we see like, somebody is maybe, coming up short, or maybe there's an area that we're under investing. And so
Yeah.
I think that the maybe not necessarily perspective, but what's been very helpful for us is I'm talking about the founders right now, but we're definitely trying to scale this culture across the company, because we do have our principles, our first principles codified,
Nice.
is to lean into radical candor. And it's not of course, it's not a concept that's unique to, Clearmatrix, but if you do it early, I think that it makes a world of difference, especially as you're trying to make some very big decisions, most of the time with imperfect information. And so that's been a helpful, I guess, key principle, for us, that we, all three of us, in fact, continue to honor. But now we want to make sure that's also a practice across all of our associates.
Absolutely. I think, I know it's not easy, being transparent and having a co-founder. But I think what matters is your intention. Like, that you guys aren't trying to insult each other. You have to have those hard conversations. That's your job as a CEO, and their job as the co-founders. But I think, yeah, if you can solidify that early on, taking that into the culture of the rest of your company as you guys continue to grow is super, super important. So I appreciate you sharing those insights. But Jose, is there maybe anything else that you want to leave my audience or even your audience with in the way that they think about Clearmatrix and the problems that you
Yeah.
guys are looking to solve?
One way that we often put it, again, it's what's the key differentiator? And so it's and this is something that we genuinely, believe in, is that we're not selling AI, we're unlocking its purpose. And
Mm.
that is the whole point of our platform.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. I think I'll make sure that I include links in the description to your guys's LinkedIn, your social media and the website as well. But Jose, I just wanted to tell you, thank you so much again for making this podcast happen. I know we had to record it the second time around, but I really appreciate your time and your insights today.
Absolutely. And I'm glad again that we got a second shot at this. And I hope again that your audience finds this insightful, helpful. Also looking forward to, any comments or stories that they share, because we're continuously learning ourselves. And that's
Absolutely.
just part of the founder's journey.
Yeah, 1,000%. And I know I'm looking forward to making some short form clips out of this podcast as well. For you guys don't know this in the audience, but Jose's social media team crushes it. I told him I love their content, so I'll make sure that I give them some assets. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, let us know in the comments on YouTube, or if you see this posted on LinkedIn. And I'd love to bring Jose back on maybe sometime in the next couple of months to see where you
That'd be
guys are
great.
at come 2026.
Yeah, that'd be great, Tyson. And thank you so much for your time and attention.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, there you guys have it. Like I said, let us know if you have any questions, and we will catch you guys in the next video.
Thanks, everybody.